right. Creationism versus evolution. We're looking at the worldwide flood possibility. We see a plethora of evidence, far greater than evolution, of a rapid, recent Earth, catastrophic event of worldwide flood that can create all of the topography that we can see and observe today. We have an explanation that's very plausible that doesn't fall away from a worldwide flood. Often it does fall away from many, many millions of years. How does a fish, fossil, eating another fish, form in a fossil form over 200 million years old? How long does it take that fish to eat that other fish? Anyway, here we are back in K31. .htm, and we left off. Compare a reference from Dr. Patton's notes. I attended a museum and a lecture at which Dr. Patton's lecture has some notes that I was able to obtain, and very enlightening. We're at the section here. We have any number of evolutionists, geologists both, and creationists that speak of this issue of the sedimentary rocks. How long did it take? How did they get there? We've been going on this far. I've been mispronouncing a lot of words. Not often I get to speak about these words, but here's the subject. Unprecedented sedimentary activity points to a worldwide flood. We've gotten all the way down to Dr. Patton's notes, which indicates that an anti-creationist Stansfield at Cal Poly, page 84, all of the following points to a young Earth. Is what he says. Water from volcanoes, uranium accumulation, meteoric dust in strata, helium in the atmosphere, pressure in oil reserves, meteorites in strata, lava from volcanoes, human population, and radiocarbon in the atmosphere. That's what he says, and he's an anti-creationist. We have the next subject. Sedimentary activity cannot be explained by uniformitarianism. Uniformitarianism, slow processes that haven't changed over the many, many millennia, millions of years. Nothing catastrophic of any great significance, certainly nothing worldwide. However, most of the sedimentary rocks of the Earth's crust, which are the ones containing fossil remains, and which therefore provide the chief basis of geologic interpretation of Earth history, have been laid down as sediments by moving water. Some have apparently been formed by wind, glaciers, or other agencies, but by far the largest part of sedimentary rocks are aqueous in origin, water. It is even possible that many metamorphic rocks, including granitized rocks ordinarily classed as igneous, were originally sedimentaries, but because of the huge weight, pressure of miles and miles high of water in a worldwide flood, that will crush the sedimentaries into rock. Granite, even. Sedimentary rocks have been formed through a process of erosion, transportation, deposition, and lithification, the forming of stone through tremendous pressure of sediments. The deposition occurs, of course, when the running water containing the sediments enters a quiescent, quiet, or less rapidly moving body of water, the lowered velocity resulting in the dropping out of part or all of its load and moving sediment. If the sediment happens to contain organic remains, then these are buried by the sands or silts accompanying them. The remains of such plant and animal forms, as discovered in the present sedimentary rocks of the Earth, have of course served as the basis of the evolutionist idea of our modern divisions of the strata into units of geologic time that they fabricated, and have provided paleontology with the materials upon which the bulk of the falsely interpreted evidence of organic evolution rests today. How old are the fossils? Old as the rocks. How old are the rocks? Old as the fossils. Really. Here is where the principle of uniformity is falsely applied most insistently by evolutionists. To be consistent with uniformitarianism, the various types of sedimentary rocks must all be interpreted in terms of the so-called environments of deposition exactly equivalent to present-day situations where sediments are being laid down. That's simply not always the case. Even over recent history, we've had catastrophes. Every year we have large storms, hurricanes, tornadoes, volcanoes, earthquakes, catastrophic events that change the topography. Mount St. Helens, catastrophic, changed the topography, and then it goes back in 25 years and we didn't even know one was there. Rocks are thus said to have been deposited in deltaic river deltas, lacustrine lakes, and lagunal and other modern-day environments. I don't know why they don't just say rivers and lakes. Well, that's the geologist. The many different methods of attempting to classify depositional environments have become more complex with the passing of time, unnecessarily. The very fact that so many different environments are postulated, and indeed so many different systems of classifying environments suggested by different authorities, plainly would indicate that it is impossible to apply successfully strictly uniformitarian principles to modern processes and environments of deposition with the hope of arriving at a satisfactory and workable means of classifying ancient sediments. Just go ahead and admit it. Catastrophic things have happened, and they happen every year. Sometimes some of them are worldwide, like the worldwide flood. The most spectacular and quantitatively significant sedimentary rock deposits of the world are found in geosynclines, great downward folds in the Earth's crust, which are supposed by the evolutionists to have been great troughs of continuing subsistence, continuous settling of sediments at bottom of the seas and rivers, in shallow seas. Not going to happen. Didn't happen. The evolutionist concept has been that large masses of sediments were being more or less continuously deposited at shallow depths as rivers entered the seas, and that the region subsided at a rate just sufficient to balance the incoming sediments. Then later, the entire geosyncline was somehow uplifted. That sounds cataclysmic to me, to form one of our present mountain ranges. Yeah, it sure is. Thus, supposedly accounting for the tremendous beds of sedimentary stratified rock found in all the continents. The problem is how to account for the origin of the geosyncline in the first place. Then how to explain the continued subsistence for lack, which incidentally there is little or no direct evidence. How to account for the source areas from which these great volumes of sediments must have been eroded. And lastly, how to account for the uplift and deformation of these geosynclines to form the present mountain ranges, much higher than they were in ancient times. None of these basic questions has yet been solved on the basis of uniformity. So Dr. Adams, only a decade ago, called this problem of the origin of geosynclines one of the most major unsolved problems of geology. And that's his book, Some Unsolved Problems of Geophysics. And there has been nothing significant, he says, accomplished in the intervening period to solve it. The George C. Kennedy professor of geology at UCLA says, these deep troughs filled with sediments may contain 50 to 100,000 feet of sediments and may be 1,000 or more miles long and 100 miles in width. The mystery, then, of the down-sinking of the sedimentary troughs in which low-density sediments apparently displace higher-density rocks is heightened when we note that these narrow, elongate zones in the Earth's crust down-warped the most with the greatest accumulation of rock debris shed by the higher portions of the continents, being in turn the mountain ranges in the highest portions of the continents. Wow. That's his book, Origin of Continents. Sounds more catastrophic. Well, we go back to the next topic. Innumerable geological formations cannot be explained by uniformitarianism. Cough drop. Look at peneplains. There is evidence that in the past there were great peneplains at various places and times. These were vast surfaces of erosion, which had been worn down almost to flat, plain surfaces, as the word means. Once again, assuming that there actually have been in the past many of these extensive plains of subaerial erosion at the Earth's surface, As the evidence seems to indicate in some places, the lack of anything in the present to correspond to them shows that the present is not the key to the past. You have to imagine things and then take what you imagine in the present and project it to the past. Busy day on the phone. Dry waterfalls and canyons. Other striking erosional features, unmatched by modern equivalents, would include the great numbers of dry canyons and falls. Particularly picturesque are the so-called scabland areas, of which the best known in this country is the Columbia Plateau. Here are vast and intricate dry canyons or coulees, hanging valleys, dry waterfalls, rock-rimmed basins, and other bizarre features are found in profusion. These things are obviously not being formed anywhere at the present, so there is much disagreement among geologists as to their explanation. Seems like imagination, a course in imagination is needed. The man who has made the most thorough study of the area is Harlan Bretz, whose theory envisaged a sudden vast flood as being the only agency capable of creating these forms. Wow. That's a great imagination there. Thornberry's comment here is interesting. Bretz has been able to account for such a flood, but maintained that field evidence indicated its reality. This theory represents a return to catastrophism, which many geologists have been reluctant to accept. Oh, it's a belief system. What would you like to believe? Fluviatile plains and alluvial slopes. We're getting into the geological terms here. Nor are the geosynclines the only depositional features of physiography, which seem unrelated to any sort of deposits being formed at the present time. The large central region of the United States, Great Plains, stretching roughly from the Rockies to the Mississippi, Canada, Mexico, consists largely of remnants of a single great fluviatile plain, that which is produced by stream or river action, or alluvial slope, that which is formed of material deposited by running water, like clay, sand, silt, gravel, and so on. Here again one must visualize a phenomenon for which there is no parallel in the modern world except on a much smaller scale. The principle of uniformity is misnamed if, to interpret ancient phenomena on the basis of the present, the expedient of extrapolation going beyond normalcy must so continually be employed as to such a degree that almost everywhere one looks he can find evidence of widespread deposition, either alluvial or deltaic, in nature, of magnitude quite beyond that of any deposits being formed in the present. Imaginations, again. Mountain-burying sediments in the Uinta Mountains of Utah are believed by evolutionists to have been derived from the wearing down of more than 7,000 cubic miles from the summit of a great fold, filling in the surrounding area to a depth of at least several thousand feet, up almost to the summits of the remaining mountains themselves. Quite an imagination. After the formation of the now anomalous, abnormal, not in accordance with present-day processes, rivers on these tremendous alluvial deposits, another uplift is postulated by evolutionists. You just make the stuff up. Still another evidence that present-day rates of erosion and deposition cannot account for the ancient deposits as they are found. Did they ever bother to say, well, possible that a lot of water came by here? Another subject. Large, high plateau and spectacular canyons with uniform horizontal strata. Another major difficulty of the uniformitarian concept of sedimentary processes is found in those great areas of very thick deposits, which have gone through one or more cycles of uplift and submergence and yet remain marvelously horizontal and continuous. Water does that. This comes, two bodies slam together, flatten everything. A good example is found in the Colorado Plateaus. Describing this province, Fenneman says that the first distinguishing feature is approximately horizontality of its rocks. The second distinguishing feature of the province is great elevation. A lot of water. Get this next time.